tell you a story is way better looking than any movie I could literally make to tell you that story. And I realized this when we did a podcast, me and Mosier, episode of Smodcast was called The Crapture. And it was about essentially like the rapture happening, and Jesus comes back to take everybody and kill them all like the Terminator. And the government turned to Scott Mosier and grafted a demon onto him, and he had to fight Jesus and shit like that. And it's a pretty fun podcast. When I listened back to it, I was like, man, if I wanted to make that into a movie, it would have cost so much money. But we just sat there talking about it. Everyone listening makes it into their movie. So I kind of like that. I like the democratization that podcast kind of had to it. And as much as like, I can do it and you can do it. And I started doing it for a while, and all I see in the Twitter feed are people going like, I started a podcast because it's your podcast, because it sounds so fucking simple and stupid. And I'm like, yeah, isn't it? Like the same thing I felt about Slacker. People would say that to me about Clerks. Like, I became a filmmaker because I saw Clerks, and I knew that was a backhanded way of saying, your shit looks so bad, I figured I could do it too. And that's what's kind of going on with the podcast, because when people listen to a podcast, they realize this is it. It's just two fuckers talking about shit, or three or four. Like, there's no trick to this, and that's the greatest trick you'll ever pull. It's going into the nooks and crannies. People aren't interested in it as much because it's not high profile. It's not sexy. It doesn't put you on television or on movie screens and shit. But I'm more interested in the corners now, because that's where you get real cool shit done. And we've been slowly building Smodcast.com for like the last year and a half, 2 years. And now it's kind of hit this place where I think I can live off it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think I finally reached that place I've been trying to get to for nearly 20 years. I'm lazy. I don't want to work for anybody except the audience. I'll work like a bitch for the audience, you know?
Actually, you said you don't think you should be making movies. I think there's 6,500 people in here that think you should be making movies.
They're very sweet. But these 6,500 people could have gone to see a free movie, Cowboys vs. Aliens. How smart are they? Instead, they're listening to the fat guy talk again, you know? So, I don't know. At a certain time, you owe it to your audience to kind of put it down if you're not going to be any good at it. Even if people are like, we want you to keep going. You get to a point where you're just like, you're not going to want what I keep doing. I'm not going to be what you remember. It's going to be diminishing returns. And I feel like, let me close on my terms. So many people get pushed out of this business. We're just not called back. And, they're just like, we're done with you. You have no more stories to tell. That'd be heartbreaking to me, man, to be kicked out of the party. I never wanted to be that dude. I always wanted to be the dude that left the party early, not the dude who's like still sitting on the couch going, oh man, you want to watch Avatar together? I just want to fucking get out while people are like, where'd he go? He was a good guy. He took off, without them being like, he's still fucking here. So for me to kind of put one thing aside, I have to pick up something else. And I've picked up the podcast thing and ran with it. And it has turned into magic. It has done shit. I mean, it literally probably saved Jason Muse's life, I'll be honest with you. Taught him the value of his own self in a way that, nobody could, or I couldn't, or being in all those movies couldn't do. It was a dude who literally gets up there and tells his own story, warts and all. And his story can be harrowing at times, funny as fuck, but harrowing at times, about doing drugs and where he came from and shit like that. And he's a dude who would never go to therapy. For years I was like, you should go talk about this shit, get this darkness off yourself. He's like, oh, I don't know about that kind of thing, I don't believe in it. But yet he'll get up on stage every week, do the same thing, and the audience is his fucking therapy. And I swear to you, it's not overstatement. I've watched it for a year. I've watched that man change because he understood finally. He's like, oh, I have something to say. And not just like they think I'm funny because I'll pull my dick out and windmill or something like that, but also because like I've lived a life now and I can impart some experience and tell them the pitfalls to look out for or something like that. The value of a storyteller. He's realized his own value as a storyteller. So Smodcast provided that. And then Smodcast kicked off 2 TV shows, just sitting around doing podcasts for a couple of years. There's this one that we just did as a pilot for AMC. It was a comic book store reality show. We're calling it right now The Secret Stash, and it's based on our Tell 'em Steve Dave podcast with my friends Brian and Walt. It's set in the Secret Stash back in Red Bank. We finished it up, put it together, pilot presentation, and it fucking rocked. And you watch it and you're just like, how come nobody ever did this before? It's like a fucking comic book store reality show. It's a little bit like podcast, opens with podcast, then kind of moves a bit into the Pawn Stars kind of world as we start trading. Like, dude brings in a Gamera doll, and you're like, a Gamera doll on television. And then they move into like a bit of hoarders, because you meet people putting shit in their basements and whatnot, lots of toys in their basements. And then you come back to the stash, and it all came from a fucking podcast, man. That's what I thought was so badass. So I don't know if they're going to pick it up. We submitted it last week, and God willing, they'll pick it up, because that would be fucking sweet. But, thank you. That was one, man, and that just came from people listening to podcasts. Charlie, this dude at Original Media, he came to me, he's like, AMC is looking for a kind of geek programming, and I was like, I don't really do TV, but I've been thinking a really inexpensive program would be if you did like, Pawn Stars in a fucking comic book store. It makes sense. And he took that to AMC and they liked it and they were trying to figure out where to shoot it. And I was like, just go cross country, find a staff, find, the most erudite comic book store staff on the planet or something, shoot in their store. And they wanted to shoot a presentation to show AMC what it looked like. So I was like, I got a store in Jersey. You can shoot it there, and the boys, I'm sure, will stand in for whatever it is we want to do. And then everyone involved just started listening to the podcast to tell them Steve Dave. And suddenly they were like, this is the show. Shoot these guys. You don't have to look any further. This is the show. And that came from a fucking podcast. There's this other TV show that we've been, I don't know if you saw me around the con, I've been shooting segments for it and whatnot. We're putting together this pilot presentation. I can't really talk about that much, but we are shooting it. We're going to be shooting it next week, and it involves everybody at smodcast.com. It's pretty fucking amazing. That came from podcast too. And now here's the thing that came from podcast that I'm most fucking excited about. When you do a podcast, you sit around and talk for like an hour. That's an hour of fucking content. That's writing. You know what I'm saying? You may say it out loud. You may not be typing it, but that's essentially writing. I started looking at all these hours of podcasts we had, and I'm like, each one is essentially a little book, or at least a section of a book, if you transcribe them. Like, I used to watch Donahue when I was a kid, the talk show, and at the end they'd always be like, for a written transcription, you can go. Is it ready? All right, we got a Blu-ray player. That's awesome. At the end of it, they would go like, for a written transcription, you could call. And one day when I was young, I was like, what is that, a written transcription? And my mom was like, everything they said on the TV show. And I was like a fucking script? That's it. She's like, no, like a transcription. And that really fascinated me, and it always stuck with me. And there's these dudes who do, I don't know if you ever saw on Twitter, tweet books. They're pretty ingenious. There's a little company where essentially they take your tweets and publish them into a book form. And I'd seen it on Twitter, and I was like, that's fucking cool. And I reached out to them, and they sent me a tweet book that was like every tweet I had ever written about Jen up until that point. And I sent them a cover of her kind of naked, and they put it on the book and sent it back to me. And it was such a sweet gift and shit, and I stare at it all the time because she's naked on the cover. And, but also I was just like, this is cool, man. Like, there has to be something here. So recently we teamed up with those cats, and we created this company called Podbooks. Podbookz. Podbooks.com. Through there, we're going to publish all of our podcasts under soft or hardcover, which I think is cool because essentially you have a library full of our fucking podcasts like encyclopedias. But more importantly, we're going to publish your podcasts too. So the idea of like anybody who has a podcast can literally just send it in, have it transcribed, and they send you back a book, a published version of your written word. That's the thing that I'm most fucking excited about right now, man. We're going to start publishing podcasts. That's kind of neat. All that came from just sitting around and talking. So for me, I love film, and I always will. My first love and whatnot gave me everything I have in this life. But at the end of the day, I want to leave that to better men than myself and women. And I'll go over here and just talk for a while, because so far it's really working out for us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
And by the way, out of all the panels that I've ever asked questions at, best response I've ever gotten.
Oh, thanks, man. Right on. I appreciate that. Kind of thing that could get a man laid. I was like, honey, did you hear that? She's like, I don't give a shit. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good. How you doing?
Excellent, excellent.
All right, so I'm actually here on behalf of my roommate. A couple years ago, you signed a Twilight poster for this guy.
Okay.
Do you remember that?
No.
Not at all. Okay.
But I'm sure it happened. I signed, people put shit in front of me, I signed all the time. People showed up at my house once with a moving truck, and they were like, you signed your deed at Comic-Con. And I was like, really? They're like, we just put it in front of you, you signed it. We had to move out of my house. It's bullshit. But it's a way of saying I'll sign anything, so I probably did sign the Twilight poster.
Right. You actually wrote, fuck Twilight, Heart and Shimmer.
And that's definitely me, yeah.
It was actually for his wife.
Yeah.
Now, he thought it was hilarious. Unfortunately, his wife didn't.
Right.
And ever since that, she hasn't put out for him. And he's devastated. He's completely devastated. He's in my room. And
Was this a year ago?
2 years. For 2 years. He's devastated. He can't divorce her.
You are lying, dude. You're saying that I cock-blocked this man for 2 years simply with a signature? Oh, my legs fucking Luthor, man?
He thought it was going to be funny, but unfortunate. But I hear him crying in the bathroom, in the kitchen, and everything. Oh, so Is there a way you can get him a flashlight?
There absolutely is. I do feel a bit bad and whatnot. I owe him at least a fleshlight, and I should have a conversation with his girlfriend, man. And be like, life is short. Fuck him now. Don't let a poster stop you, you know, unless it's around you wrapped tightly as a chastity belt. Other than that, fuck away. Yeah, I can hook you up, man. Megan? Megan, give him one of my fleshlights, please. I don't leave home without it, man. It's like an American Express and shit. I never know when I gotta make a deposit. Megan will find you and hook you up, dude. We'll make sure we send your buddy a fleshlight.
All right, thanks.
And tell those ladies stop being such a fucking harpy. Thank you, sir. Hey, man, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
This is crazy. First of all, I could never even see myself doing this, and you're right there. So,
Between the long coat and you being like, this is crazy, I've never seen myself doing this.
it's like a weird.
Please tell me you don't have a bunch of C4 taped to your cock or something. I don't want to go tonight. I'm ready to go one day, but not tonight. Although Comic-Con wouldn't be bad, man.
Yeah, actually.
Because you might get saved by, like, the Avengers or something. Oh, that's right. They wouldn't come this year. One by one, I'm just burning every bridge. So I have no choice but to podcast at this point. There goes Disney. How are you, sir? What can I do for you?
My question was, in your opinion, what is the most important force in pop culture and counterculture in the past 20 years, and what's your opinion on said forces?
Oh, Jesus. Of the last 20 years, okay, I don't know. I can't point to who has the best track record, but I can point to my own personal example. Will that help?
Yeah.
Hands down, Quentin Tarantino for me. And I'll tell you why. Quentin Tarantino is when I talk about seeing Hal Hartley's Trust, and I talk about seeing Richard Linklater's Slacker, and those films taught me, Slacker taught me, you know, it doesn't have to have movie stars, 3 acts, a car chase, nothing. It can just follow people around. Untraditional storytelling, filmmaking is what Slacker taught me. The Trust taught me that you can deliver dialogue, and it's Hal Hartley flick, beautiful movie if you've never seen it, with the late Adrian Shelley. It taught me that you can deliver dialogue in such a way that's a bit surreal, and people will let you go, because it's a movie, it's fake, it is supposed to be a bit fantasized and stuff. But hands down, the one that made me who I am today, without even knowing it, was sit around and talk about shit that don't matter, dialogue that doesn't push the plot forward, you know, shit that's, where's the droids, none of that stuff. Like, literally just, you could sit around and talk about movies, and talking about movies in movies counts as movies. I was like, this is breathtaking, I want in. And suddenly it made it seem kind of feasible. So for me, I always love Quentin stuff. First and foremost, I think he makes amazing movies, very cool movies and shit like that, but also he's a brilliant writer, and he was the guy that kind of kicked open the door for me. And for years and years, I made my movies, you know, I made Kevin Smith movies and what they look like, skew stuff, but some people here have seen and whatnot. But him I always looked at as like the role model. His stuff was the stuff where I'm like, oh my God, like, that's a classy filmmaker. If I could be that guy, if I could be any other filmmaker, if I could have any other filmmaker's talent, it would be that. And it took me until Red State to get the balls, the sack, to try it, you know, because you watch your betters work forever and you're like, that's what they do, that's magic, I do this shit, and this is what I do, and I'll never step outside this box. And, you know, as I said before, I know the next movie's the last movie. So as I'm cruising to what I feel is, you know, the self-imposed end, but the end nonetheless, hang up my fucking skates, I want to try shit that I didn't try in my career at all. Like, I know how to make a Kevin Smith movie. I could go to sleep for 100 years, rocket off into space for 5 years like that terrible Superman movie. And I could come back and still know how to make a Kevin Smith movie. It's just in my DNA and genetics. So I felt like maybe I would like to put aside making a Kevin Smith movie and try making something else. And the first person I thought about was Quentin. I was like, man, if I can make a movie like Quentin, try something a little different, way outside my fucking